Welcome, everyone. It's great to be here with you all in New Orleans for the first day of JFF Horizons. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to thank JFF for this fantastic gathering and for my wonderful panelists who I've had the pleasure of getting to know as colleagues and friends over the years. By way of introduction, I'm Jake Edwards. I'm a Vice President of Impact Investing at Social Finance. Social Finance is a national nonprofit that builds partnerships and investments to mobilize impact capital and measurably improve individuals' lives. The backdrop for our conversation today reflects headlines that are all too familiar. The majority of Americans don't have a college degree. Yet at the same time, there are 11.4 million unfilled jobs, many of which are good-paying jobs that don't require a college degree. So today, we're going to talk about innovative solutions to solve that problem. And those solutions are going to have four general themes across them. First, they're focused on removing upfront cost barriers for low-income and underserved individuals to access high-quality, non-degree education and training programs. Second, they invest in critical wraparound supports that have proven to increase graduation and employment outcomes. Third, they work backwards from employer demand, and they tailor programs and curriculum to actually meet the demands of employers and lead to good-paying jobs. And fourth, they reimagine the risk paradigm and align incentives of all project partners towards student success. One recent example from my work that hopefully checks those four boxes is our $100 million Google Career Certificate Fund that we announced in February of this year. Through that fund, we're focused on expanding access to high-quality training programs. So how does it work? Individuals will enroll with a set of training provider partners, currently Year Up and Merit America, a portfolio that will grow over time. Students, through those training programs, will get access to career certificates, whether that be in IT career support or project management, data analytics, UX design. The fund is supported by Google Treasury and through its philanthropic arm, google.org, and will enable 20,000 learners to gain digital skills and land good-paying jobs. In addition to the certificates and those particular skill sets, learners will get access to critical wraparound supports, whether that be enhanced job placement and career coaching, or transportation support, or childcare support, looking to address the persistent barriers that are inhibiting persistence, graduation, and employment. When students graduate, if they obtain a job earning in excess of $40,000, they repay the program costs at zero interest through flat monthly payments of around $100. If at any point an individual earns less than $40,000, is unemployed or underemployed, their payment obligation ends. The Google Career Certificate Fund is just one example of novel and new approaches to help individuals get in-demand skills and ultimately create the right systems that create incentives and alignment towards those student outcomes. And that's just one of the many reasons why I'm delighted to be joined by my panelists today, who are leaders, friends on the forefront of this movement. I'm joined today by Troy Blackwood, Head of Structured Investments at Google, Nitzan Pelman, CEO of ClimbHire, and Jukay Hsu, CEO of Pursuit. It's great to be with you all today. To get us started, we'd love to just hear a little bit about your work, your approach, and what challenges you try to solve through the way in which you operate and deliver services. Troy, can we start with you?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here and be in a room with such, inspiring folks and be on the stage with everyone here. My name is Troy Blackwood again. I lead a team at Google that structures many of the social impact and climate-related investment vehicles. And so my mandate is quite broad, and it includes a number of things. One of which being supporting developers that are developing affordable housing units, all the way to supporting CDFIs that are helping small businesses work through the pandemic, and then it goes all the way to the other end of buying actual wind and solar farms and renewable energy assets around the world. And lastly is the one that Jake brought up, which is most relevant for today and for you folks, is structuring the $100 million Career Certificates Fund. And we generally love, when you look at Google products, you'll notice there's a theme that typically kind of flow through that. And that theme is the concept of making information, technology, and tools accessible to all. And that's an important theme that I think is also present in the career certificates and the $100 million fund that we've wrapped around that. And at Google, this just fits within our mission. And so we're super excited about that. Also, my team, we get very excited to work with the best and the brightest, like Jake's of the world, and other folks in this room, and work towards solving some of the biggest challenges that we face today. And the Career Certificates Fund is one thing that we're super proud of. Jake did a great job of explaining kind of how it works, but hopefully that gives you a little bit more context in terms of how that fits within Google, why that's important to Google. And I'm excited to talk a little bit more about it today.
Nitzan, how about you?
I run an organization called Climb Higher. And the easiest way to understand Climb Higher is by me asking the audience 2 questions. So, how many people in this room have ever gotten a job through a warm introduction or somebody in your network? If that's happened to you, raise your hand. Okay, follow-up question. How many jobs have you gotten that way? Count them and put them up with your fingers on your hands. All right, I see lots of 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s. Most people in this room have gotten jobs through relationships and connections. And 4 years ago, I was an entrepreneur in residence at LinkedIn. And when I was there, they put a referral button on their platform. And what they learned by doing that was that the vast majority of job seekers were getting jobs through referrals. And all of you in this audience have demonstrated what the LinkedIn data was telling the company as well, which is that most people get jobs through connections and relationships. I had a hypothesis that there's lots of people out there who may not have robust networks or may not even really understand how their networks can be utilized for them to get great jobs. And if you don't get to go to a 4-year college and play lacrosse and sing in an a cappella club and join a frat, then you may not get to build social capital and relationships that then open up doors for the rest of your life. And our hypothesis was that those people end up potentially working in retail or earning minimum wage or working in a lot of gig roles. And then we needed to create a workforce and upskilling organization that focused on equal parts on building networks, social capital, and relationships alongside of in-demand skills. And we are incredibly proud of the fact that 87% of our alum have successfully gone from working in low-wage jobs to middle-class jobs, and the vast majority of them have done that through the support system of each other and the alumni network that comes from Climb Higher.
Jukay, can you tell us a little bit about Pursuit?
That's great. So happy to be here today with everyone. Help Start Pursuit. Tackling this issue around social economic mobility. We primarily work with blue-collar workers from low-income backgrounds and provide upskilling for them into the careers of the future. So focus on technology. This is a very difficult problem. I think Jay kind of talked about some of the different segments of kind of these kind of ecosystems. And I think part of our thesis is that there are a lot of perverse incentives among the different players: training institutions, students, employers, and funders. So our approach at a high level is taking the highest need and highest potential kind of adults, on average earning about $16,000 before our program, provide about a year of training, and then at the end of that, they get jobs around $90,000 a year. So, really transformative in terms of income boosts, Now that sounds really simple, but it is very, very difficult, as everyone knows here. And I think the way we're able to do that, though, it's not just focused on training. It is around a vertically integrated solution. Training has to be there, has to be important. Working with employers to remove structural barriers and providing support service to enable that to happen. And then ultimately, a financing mechanism that aligns incentives across from all those kind of stakeholders to make sure there are real results. So it's complex and nuanced. The headline is easy, but I think that's what's really challenging and exciting about tackling this kind of really important issue.
I love that. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that a through line through all of these comments and these organizations are innovative financing models. Troy, I gave the executive summary on the Google Career Certificates Fund, but this is certainly something that's near and dear to your heart and your everyday work. Would love to hear from your perspective, what were some of the key objectives, parameters, themes as you thought about what this financing should look like and how it should be available to students?
Yeah. And I talked about how the fund kind of fits within Google and Google's mission. Maybe I'll also hit on why we just thought it was important generally. And I know many of the folks in this room probably already know this, but today, if you take a step back and look at our country, we have a significant portion of folks in the labor force that don't have college degrees. And therefore, there's a challenge for us now to create this path for them to be able to access some of the job markets and career fields that we think will be prominent in the future. Google Career Certs help provide some of the skills behind that. And that was one of the things that we were thinking about as we created these programs. But wrapping the fund around these programs was a way to scale impact. And what I mean by scaling impact, it's one, Google's able to leverage their balance sheet, which we're in a position where we have a large balance sheet and we can leverage that. So $100 million is a big number and provide a lot of funding. But in terms of scaling, there are a couple of mechanisms that we've included in the fund that will help with that. So when Jake talked about successful students getting through the program, achieving the career certificate, and landing a job above a certain threshold, those folks, when they pay back $100 a month, where that money is going is to help recycle to get more learners. So we have some very ambitious goals around this, right? We want to enable folks to create that path and enable folks to get these high-wage jobs in these new field and emerging fields that we think will be prominent in the future, but also allow them to pay it forward and help bring others up. And the ambitious goal is that we want to get over 20,000 people to get to these successful jobs in this field. The other thing is, we'll be growing the fund in that way, but allowing social finance to partner with a number of nonprofits. Nonprofits, training providers, like the folks on this stage and the folks sitting down here in the room, we want to be able to work, again, with the best and brightest that already are doing the great work. Google, we don't want to recreate the wheel. We want to provide the necessary funding to help students. And we think if we can create mechanisms that do it in a scalable way, then we can also create a model that can encourage others to follow suit. So other corporates, other investors, other folks that are social impact minded or not but interested, we've, over the last several months since we've announced the fund, I've had a number of conversations with other corporates and other folks in the space that wear similar hats as I do, and to try to help them understand the model that we're trying to create, and not saying this is the perfect model, but creating something that's innovative and that folks can follow along with or even improve on in the future. And that's the most important thing on our end.
I love that. Google is certainly on the forefront here. Nitzan and Jukay, you all are entrepreneurs and you founded your amazing organizations and probably pretty quickly needed to grapple with the question of how do we finance this? How did you go about that process, and how do you finance your programs, and what does that look like, and how has it changed over time?
So we have what we call a benevolent ISA, an income sharing agreement, and we spend a lot of time researching models out there. There's a lot of income sharing agreements that are connected to what I consider to be a high level of interest. And so, if you say to a student, you don't have to pay anything on the front end, but then once you get a job, you have to pay a certain amount every month, but then there's like 10% interest on top of that, that to me doesn't seem like the most student-friendly income sharing agreement out there. And so we stayed away from those, and we essentially, through philanthropy, created our own income sharing agreement in which everyone who comes into Climb Higher is earning below livable wage. That's a criteria to be in the program. And so they don't pay anything when they're in the program, and only when they get a job that pays $50K or more, then they're in a position to pay for the next person to have the same opportunity. And they pay $150 a month for 4 years. It's flat, it's not a percentage of their income, and there's no interest. I'm really excited about the Google Fund because that creates opportunities for organizations like ours to really be incentivized to do more of that pay after you get a job, but it's all based on outcomes and incentivizing organizations like ours to do everything we can to make sure that our climbers and our students are getting great jobs.
Jukay?
Yeah, I think this is a really important issue. I know finance might seem disconnected with what we all care about, which is helping people, creating change and kind of these outcomes, but it's actually a really root issue to workforce development. Most workforce development is done by nonprofits. If you look at the pools of capital, in New York City, for example, for adults, it's about $28 million total pool of capital from foundations and corporations to support upskilling, job training, right? $28 million in New York, in one of the wealthiest cities in the world, right? So I think it is really this issue. There's a funding mechanism, but also around outcomes, I think. So our approach, and I didn't know any of this, originally, and I'm from New York, from Queens, as a poor immigrant kid from Queens. I didn't know anything about philanthropy, nonprofits, any of this stuff. Just wanted to, try to solve these kind of issues, right? And quickly, as we started raising philanthropy as well, realize these market conditions around that. So how do we design a system that kind of enables that? You need the outcomes and the financing around that. So I think over the years, been doing this for like eight years now, realizing the issue's been the same, but trying to implement and develop these kind of tools with these kind of partners around creative capital. So, and part of this is also, I think our belief is that this is a long-term time horizon, right? If you really want a blue-collar worker into an excellent career, that takes multiple years to actually understand results. So if that assumption is correct, to really understand the outcomes, how do you align different kinds of capital to utilize that? So, we have philanthropy, incredibly important, because we want to serve those highest needs. We created our what we call Pursuit Bond, which is an ISA kind of mechanism in 2016. So, and we designed it also similarly. How does everyone be better off? And so having to implement that from 6 years, raise pools of capital against that, generate returns, and then also employers also play a role. So I don't think it's either or. This is, I guess, a much more nuanced kind of understanding of things, and I think what we have kind of time for. But I think we have to think thoughtfully about the different tools, different kinds of capital, and where the value is added to ultimately, create changes in kind of the system. But it is a really important part of the change that we're all seeking.
Thank you all for those comments. We are bumping up against time, but before we wrap up, I'd love to do a lightning round. 15, 30 seconds each. Looking out to all the folks in the audience, whether they come from a government background, a nonprofit background, a philanthropy or funding background, what would be a call to action or a challenge that you would make to folks based on your own experiences?
I'll start 20 seconds. I'll probably eat it up. But I think about it in 3 ways. I think that there's investors, social impact investors, encouraging them to follow along with some of these innovative models that we're seeing on the stage, or be innovative and come up with new models. I see it as literally 1 second left. I see it as nonprofits, folks like you in the room, helping to develop the right programs to remove the barriers for these individuals that limit them to getting to the path where we want to get to, which is a dream world of having a more inclusive and equitable job market. And then lastly is probably back to Google and other corporates to hire those individuals, to value some of these skilled certificates and not only value the traditional kind of education backgrounds that we've seen historically.
Nitzan?
I would say for the practitioners in the room to be thinking a lot more about the value that is relationships and the art of teaching how to build them and how to access them. We just see so much impact come from that, and we would be happy to share that work with anyone in this room. And I would sort of double tap on the innovative financing for the funders in this room. Organizations like ours that are the ones that really help people get jobs, to be perfectly honest, are the ones that struggle the most with figuring out how to be sustainable on the financing side. It is hard to do this work, as Jukay was saying, and so we do need funding structures that don't just fund systems level work, but actually fund the work that programs are doing to help people get jobs, and they are scalable, and so we look for more opportunities in that space.
It's always dangerous to give Jukay the last word. But here we are.
Yeah, I think so many things here, but I think thinking about the different tools one can use, and this is really part of why I really love what Google is doing, why I think this is so innovative, right? There is, with any kind of, if you're an employer, you have philanthropy, you have a balance sheet, you can hire. Those are all important pieces of one thing to do what we want to do. So instead of it being different kind of strategies, a vertically integrated approach, I think, is what's important to actually have results. And so I would encourage everyone to try to think about that. And you know, it's amazing what Google's doing and really leverage their own balance sheet to try to do that. And I hope more people are thoughtful about the different tools that are needed to create these changes that we're seeking.
Excellent. Well, please give a hand to my wonderful panelists today.